Har Har Mahadev. So yeah, just to start this story with my boarding pass, I was transferring. I was transferring in Las Vegas. I was transferring there after an event in Arizona. And I could feel the bad jujus across from the Shake Shack. So I was ordering stuff. But yeah, even standing like 3 or 4 meters away, you if you're like sensitive enough to these things, you can feel the BM. You can feel the stuff that is going on there. So I actually found some fellow like Nepali people to just huddle. I didn't talk to them, but like it just felt better sitting around people who knew what was going on because a lot of Hong Kong films actually depict like people with special capabilities going to casinos in Macau or Hong Kong and like using their abilities to get moolah. Okay. Ugyen Wangchuk was nearly killed when taken hostage by his father's enemy, Damcho Rinchen. We have seen earlier how Jigme Namgyal departed from Paro to put down the rebels in Punakha in early 1877, leaving Ugyen Wangchuk, Desi Kichalpa, and Punso Dorje to guard the watchtower in Paro and continue the assault on the Zong. The Zong is the fortress. Taking advantage of Jigme Namgyal's absence there, Damcho Rinchen traveled to Paro under the pretext of a pilgrimage to Tibet, infiltrated the watchtower, looted it, and held Ugyen Wangchuk hostage. By the way, I just had a realization. A lot of, I think, Bhutanese people who have never left Bhutan, their only impression of another person who is practicing Tibetan Buddhism is their Tibetan Lama. And so they may or may not have met a regular Joe from Tibet. And for me personally, it's kind of like when I see Dalip, I know intuitively he's not Persian, but then Dalip himself has never met a real life Persian. So then if I'm talking to him about things like about Persian people, he still might not relate to that, even though he looks like almost identical, which is like wild to me. But then, yeah, like a lot of people, if they've never left where they live, they don't really relate to the internet or the mass media the same way that people who have left like a place where they're the majority or like they're the indigenous people. Okay. Damcho Rinchen traveled to Paro under the pretext of a pilgrimage to Tibet, infiltrated the watchtower, looted it, and held Ugyen Wangchuk hostage. Only when Jigme Namgyal threatened to kill 12 members of Damcho Rinchen's sister's family was Ugyen Wangchuk set free. This must have been a traumatic but a useful learning experience for Ugyen Wangchuk. In the end, his father triumphed and he was appointed the Ponlop of Paro in 1878 at the young age of 16 or 17 by Bhutanese reckoning. 2 years after appointing him to this post, his father Jigme Namgyal passed away. His elder brother Tinlay Topge, who was earlier a monk in the Lalung monastery in Tibet and now the official at a Bhutanese province, was not an able person. So the onus of holding the power base his father had built and leading the country under a unitary power fell on Ugyen Wangchuk's young shoulders. He resembled his father in being a commanding leader and shrewd strategist, but he surpassed his father in his diplomatic skills, political judiciousness, and tact for promoting peace and friendship before recourse to violence. He was broad-minded, compassionate, honest, and straight person, as we shall see from the testimonies. Thomas says hi. Nikhil asks how to get peace. If Nikhil is still here, you can ask more specific questions, but I'm not quite sure where Nikhil is coming from. He was influenced by his strong faith in the Buddhist religion, which informed his thoughts on his actions. For this, the scholar Garma Ora calls him a strategist of faith. He was even believed to be the incarnation of a holy man from eastern Tibet. The following description by Michael Aris, doctor, professor, husband of Burmese dissident Aung San Suu Kyi, Michael Aris, captures Ugyen Wangchuk's character and approach to the state politics. Ugyen Wangchuk inherited the strengths and weaknesses of his father, but he seems to have rearranged these into a decisive pattern. He consolidated the hold his father had gained on the country, using to begin with some of his father's methods. But early in his career, he turned crucially from tactics of blunt coercion to those who promoted harmony and consensus. By doing so at a time when the shifting balance of power in Asia favored the emergence of Bhutan as an independent buffer between India and Tibet, he was able to introduce constitutional change that left him and his heirs triumphant and the country's survival as a sovereign state assured. As the founder of the Bhutanese monarchy, he certainly ranks equal with Shabdrung as the creator of the theocracy. Those are very high words to compare Ugyen Wangchuk to Shabdrung. Dr. Michael Aris. End quote. Ugyen Wangchuk's accommodating and conciliatory approach can be seen in his activities immediately following the death of his father in 1881. A good example is his attitude to the fifth mind incarnation of Shabdrung. By the time of Jigme Namgyal's death, Jigme Chogyal, the rebirth of Jigme Norbu, and therefore the fifth mind incarnation of Shabdrung, was occupying the golden throne of the Prince Regent. He was born in 1862 in the Choje family of Drametse, like his precursor. This is not surprising, as the political and social connections played a significant role in the search, nomination, and selection of the incarnations. We may remember that the fourth mind incarnation, Jigme Norbu, was himself born to the sister of the third mind incarnation, Jigme Drakpa II. The seemingly spiritual manifestation and reappearance of the High Lamas had a lot of undercurrents which influenced the final selection. Jigme Chogyal's father was a son of Tamshing, who was invited as a groom for the daughter of Sonam Dendrup in Drametse. Sonam Dendrup was a prominent figure in Bhutan by the middle of the 19th century, but he fell out with Jigme Namgyal after an allegedly unfair court verdict passed against him by Jigme Namgyal as the Desi. This verdict against Sonam Dendrup, which we touched on earlier, appears to have incensed young Jigme Chogyal, and subsequently relations between the incarnate hierarch and Jigme Namgyal seem to have remained strained. The hierarch stayed mostly in his seat and did not dwell in the capitals where Jigme Namgyal held supreme power in the years preceding his death. So he stayed out of Washington. When Jigme Namgyal died in Semtoka, some rowdy monks living in the vicinity even shouted in joy. Whether they were supporters of the enemies is not clear, but Ugyen Wangchuk tolerated this behavior. Then, as part of the funerary rites, which include making offerings to lamas in temples, Ugyen Wangchuk traveled to that remote area to visit the Shabdrung incarnate and had various items of offerings to see him and absolve any wrongdoing on the part of Jigme Namgyal. The Lama refused to see Ugyen Wangchuk or accept the offering and remarked that he had no regret for Jigme Namgyal's death. Ugyen Wangchuk humbly piled the offerings at the doorstep and returned, saying that he had no wish to challenge the Lama. His overtures for reconciliation and patience certainly led to very close relations between the two in the years to come. By 1904, Jigme Chogyal wrote about their meeting in Punakha in a biography. Due to the yearning induced by long deferral of a direct meeting, when we meet, our minds merge, like the meeting of father and son. Another act of accommodation and tolerance was shown in the case of the steward Byamo Sermo and a man called Ashang Wang. The steward killed Samde Dorje, the Punlup, the official of Dagana appointed by Jigme Namgyal, and sought refuge under Shabdrung Jigme Chogyal. Ashang Wang, in that remote area, Ashang Wang was an enemy of Jigme Namgyal and had escaped to India. Upon the death of his enemy, both of these people returned to the capitals of Bhutan. Although Ugyen Wangchuk was capable of taking revenge on these enemies of his father, he showed forbearance and kindness and took them under his fold. Under his fold. This open-hearted character of Ugyen Wangchuk seems to have deeply impressed Lam Tsewang, a staunch ally of his father, and the latter gave his daughter Lutjung Droma to Ugyen Wangchuk as his wife. He was the first of 4 women in Ugyen Wangchuk's life. One source even mentions that Ugyen Wangchuk and she had a daughter named Bida, who later became a nun. Lang Tewang's steadfast support to and admiration of Ugyen Wangchuk was duly rewarded when the 53rd Desi Chogyal Dampo passed away in 1881. He was appointed as the 54th Desi. We can surmise that Ugyen Wangchuk had a major say in this appointment. Not all of Ugyen Wangchuk's adversaries and problems were pacified and solved by an accommodating heart and reconciliatory tone. A year after Jigme Namgyal's death, a bitter feud broke out in Bumtang, which drew Ugyen Wangchuk's attention. History repeated itself when a fresh conflict erupted in the court of Tongsa due to a broken promise. This was the 3rd such conflict in a quarter of a century. The first one was between Jigme Namgyal and Sonju Gyaltsen, and the second one between Pema Tenzin, Ugyen Wangchuk's maternal uncle, and Dunkar Gyaltsen, Ugyen Wangchuk's paternal uncle. So maternal uncle versus paternal uncle. Oh my gosh. When Pema Tenzin fought against Dunkar Gyaltsen because the latter did not honor his promise to pass on the post of the Tongsa Punlop to Pema Tenzin after 3 years as agreed, one Senge Namgyal led the forces of Pema Tenzin. Pema Tenzin promised to make him the chief of protocol in Tongsa if the war was won. Senge Namgyal fought valiantly and Pema Tenzin's side came out victorious. However, when Pema Tenzin became the Tongsa Punlop, he appointed his brother-in-law Pema Jashi as chief of protocol and denied Senge Namgyal the honor, the guy who led the troops. This embittered Senge Namgyal, who waited for an opportunity to take his revenge. The opportunity came when Pema Tenzin was building the palace of Lamai Gompa in Bumtang. His brother-in-law and chief of protocol, Pema Jashi, was made to supervise the work, which the latter did high-handedly. The courtiers working on the site protested against Pema Jashi's heavy-handed management, and as a result, Pema Tenzin dismissed from his court 2 men who led the protests. The 2 were leaving Bumtang when they met Senge Namgyal on the way. Together, the 3 disgruntled men hatched a plot to get rid of the official Pema Tenzin. On the 15th of the 6th Bhutanese month, 1882, Pema Tenzin was killed in the early hours of morning after spending the entire night playing dice with Senge Namgyal. The murder took place in the Jakardzong, a short distance from Wanding Chongli, where his sister Pema Choki was living. She sent a runner to inform her son, Ugyen Wangchuk, who was the Punlop of Paro, of his uncle's death. R.I.P. Snoop Dogg. Meanwhile, Senge Namgyal assumed the post of the Tongsa Punlop and, in order to win local support, proclaimed the abolition of all taxes in Bumtang for 1 year, except those of fodder and firewood. Pema Tenzin was said to have brought his own downfall by refusing to pay any part of the revenues of eastern Bhutan to the central government. This he is said to have done in response to the refusal of authorities in Thimbu and Punakha to pay him the Tongsa Punlop's share of the British subsidy. The payments from Tongsa traditionally funded the butter lamps and other kinds of offerings in the shrines of protector deities in Punakha and Thimbu. By withholding the payments, he had provoked the wrath of the country's guardian deities. It is said that the running short of things to offer, priests taking care of the shrines of the deities would turn the chalices and altar bowls upside down and exhort the deities to get their offerings from Tongsa. In other words, the priests prayed to the deities to regain the revenues from Tongsa. The guardian deities many Bhutanese believe caused the death of Pema Tenzin. Also, my friend needs people to buy his thangkas, so if anyone's interested, you can leave a comment or, I don't know, reach out to the Nepalese people. If his death was due to divine wrath, the brutal end of his killers was seen as an act of divine vengeance. His brother, the eighth Peling Sungchul, who was at the time in Lalong in southern Tibet, is said to have learned about his assassination almost immediately through spiritual vision and started in earnest a ritual to destroy his murderers. In fact, it was believed that Pema Tenzin's consciousness reached Peling Sungchul seeking vengeance and redemption. The divine intervention did come quickly in the form of the power and design of Ugyen Wangchuk and other members of the Pema Tenzin family. Ugyen Wangchuk led an attack on Sengye Namgyal and managed to capture the water source of the Jakar fortress. However, Sengye Namgyal and his men held the fort firmly. Moreover, he also held the wife and children of Pema Tenzin as hostages. Unable to defeat Sengye Namgyal through open war, Ugyen Wangchuk and his mother plotted a scheme to infiltrate the fortress and kill Sengye Namgyal. Firstly, Pema Choki approached Sengye Namgyal alone in order to propose a reconciliation. She argued that her brother, Pema Tenzin, had brought his death upon himself, and Sengye was now the only refuge for her and her family. She vouched for Ugyen Wangchuk's acceptance of a peaceful resolution and even ostensibly offered her daughter Chodun's hand in marriage to Sengye Namgyal, suspecting some treachery. Ooh, Sengye smart. He made her take an oath. He made her take an oath using his holy reliquary, which she did with no sign of hesitation. He believed her, and negotiations for reconciliation began. He was told that he would remain the thangka official and rule over eastern Bhutan, while Ugyen Wangchuk held his sway over western Bhutan as the Paro official. A line of people carrying bags and baskets were dispatched from the Chuling to give Sengye Namgyal a false impression that Ugyen Wangchuk's men and belongings were already being moved to Paro, but it was just a show, and the bags contained only rocks and clods. What are clods? Huh. In the meantime, a long file of people entered the fortress under the pretext of carrying food and drinks for the reconciliation party. Sengye's officers grew suspicious, but he remained convinced that there was a sincere effort of reconciliation. After the meal was finished and when the course for drinks was announced, Ugyen Wangchuk's men entered the courtroom to strike down Sengye. He would try to defend himself, but Ugyen Wangchuk, who was sitting on his right, held him down, and Sengye was hacked to death. Some of his men were also killed, while others escaped. His body and the bodies of the two men who killed Pema Tenzin were dragged to the banks of the Chamkar River. There, their heads, hearts, hands were buried under a new stupa, which was built in order to suppress all future offenses. The eighth Peling Songchuk performed the ritual of suppression and consecrated the stupa. Having gotten rid of Sengye Namgyal, Ugyen Wangchuk took over the post of Tongsa Punlap official in the early part of 1884. His first task as the Tongsa official was to clear the arrears of payment to the central government, which his late uncle refused to pay. The payments certainly helped placate any ill will held by the priests and leaders in the power centers of Punakha and Thimbu. Like his father, he seems to have also assumed the post of chamberlain to the Desi, who was at the time his closest ally, Lama Tsewa. This position was crucial for the access to and control of the highest political office. Next, his brother Tinley Tobge was appointed to his place as the Paro official and made to hold the position of the Paro and Wangdi official positions. However, Tinley Tobge died soon after due to a fatal fall from riding his pony. He left no heir. In his place, one Jampa, who was also the son of Jigme Namgyal, was appointed. Ugyen Wangchuk pardoned some people and that was the end of this section on this really exciting history in Bhutan. And if you guys would like, you can purchase also Dr. Michael Aris's book, The Raven Crown, which he published in the 90s with the British. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.